Hey, ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV, founder of DentistMetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice. So today's show actually features a pioneer in the dental podcast world. So today we have with us Dr. Alan Meade, who's the master behind Mead Family Dentistry and the widely known, critically acclaimed Dental Hacks podcast. So Dr. Meade grew up around his dad's dental practice and quickly found his passion in running a practice at a very young age. Just like with any dental practice business, Dr. Meade's seen his fair share of ups, downs, and really everything in between. So there's something for you in this episode if you've been running a practice of your own, wanting to start one, or even if you're in the startup phase. So first, here are a few things you're going to hear about today. You're going to hear about how Dr. Meade basically stole a practice from someone else, what happens when you think you're a terrible business person, and what to do to combat that, the mistakes you don't want to make when running your own practice, the advantages of owning a dive practice, what to do if you're brand new, fresh out of dental school, and looking to start a practice, the best skill you can have when opening up your first practice, what to look for demographics-wise and when opening up a practice in a new geolocation, an event you need to attend if you're serious about dentistry in order to be able to meet some of the biggest names in this industry. It's a really cool thing you guys are going to want to hear about today. So at the end of this episode, you'll find out where you can get a bonus with Dr. Alan Meade's top 5 dental hacks episodes. So they've got something crazy 300-400 hours worth of podcast now. So if you want to get a little tip of the top 5 episodes from Alan, be sure to listen all the way through this entire interview to get access to that. Now here's my interview with Dr. Alan Meade. Hello, ambitious dentists. Today I have with us the king of all dental podcasts. I have with us Dr. Alan Meade from the Dental Hacks podcast, founder of Mead Family Dental, a fantastic dental practice up north. He's one that is he's one of the biggest supporters of podcasts, and honestly, he's one of the original podcasters that really took this seriously, that really said, I'm going to make an actual podcast. I'm not just going to record some of my old seminars and then put it onto iTunes and then call it a podcast and then never see me again after 10 episodes. So, Dr. Meade, thank you so much for coming on today.
Very glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Meade, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about, where'd you go to school? What happened when you got out of school? How'd you get into practice ownership?
Sure. I grew up in actually the same town I live in. I live in Midland, Michigan. My practice is in Saginaw, Michigan, which is 25 miles away. But this area they call it the Tri-City area. So I'm very, very local guy here. And I ended up going to school for undergrad in Ohio, and then I went to the University of Minnesota for dental school. And interestingly, my dad is a dentist, so I'm one of those guys who grew up around dentistry. Quite literally, I can remember my sister and I would go over to his office while he was doing paperwork, which is funny because I do that with my kids too. And we would squirt each other with the air water syringes like around the corner and stuff. Like that was good time. So I grew up in dentistry. My first job was mowing the lawn at his office. So I've kind of been around dentistry forever. I pretty much knew I was going to be a dentist forever. In college, there was about 5 minutes there where I thought I might be a veterinarian instead. But dentistry was going to be in my blood to some extent. So I went to dental school at the University of Minnesota, and then I came back and started working with Dad as an associate. And he he'd probably had 5 associates or so before me. He'd be the greatest guy to work for ever as an associate because he was super fair with everyone. Every associate that left to buy their own practice, he said, anyone that wants to go with you, you can have them. The door's always open. It was like there were literally, as an accountant and a lawyer, you'd cringe because I don't think there was there was never a non-compete. I don't even think there was a contract signed, honestly. And what's amazing is he was very successful at it because he did very well as a dentist, and he didn't feel the competition, and there were some people that went with it, but it was like, so all these associates would kill or die for him in town. It's hilarious. They're all still in town too. It's nuts. Anyhow, So I was his last associate. I killed that business. Um, I was with him for like a year before I realized that I wasn't quite busy enough as an associate, which is probably a very familiar story to a lot of associates. That it's okay, but it's hard to develop my own practice here. Typically, the guy who's here, my dad was an overwhelming presence. People have been going to him forever, and I think it was helpful that I was his kid to some extent, but it was still I wasn't all that busy. Uh, a lot of other circumstances around it that we could get into or not, but I ended up finding a practice of a guy who literally was he opened up he just called in one day and said, "I'm not coming in anymore. I'm done. I'm retiring." So his poor office team was sort of broadsided by the fact he wasn't going to be there, and so a practice management consultant that my dad was using came and like let us know that this practice. So I went originally to just go work in the practice to keep it afloat, and then I ended up buying the practice, and I stole it. I bought it for a song. I think I bought it for $87,000.
Wow.
And I moved into his horrible little office suite that was, it was state of the art in 1972, and this would have been in 1998, so it had been there for a long time, and it was awful. It was the same building I worked in for the first 16, 17 years of my career, something like that. So yeah, I bought a practice because it was slow at Dad's office. It was cheap, and honestly, money was pretty easy to get. I did have some student debt, but it was like $85,000, and I didn't run into a lot of the things that younger dentists run into now. I mean, like $85,000 debt. I like to say, now they call that freshman year.
Yeah,
like what I came out of school with was nothing, so I had a lot of opportunity. I was and continue to be a terrible business person. I had no idea how to run a business. I was sort of thrown into it, or I chose to throw myself into it. So what I've learned slowly but surely over time, with the help of some good people, some good people that know what they're doing. But it is funny to think that I look back, I'm like, God, I was really clueless. Like,
experience is a great teacher, isn't it?
well, it is. But I'm lucky for the fact that the mistakes I made then would be relatively inexpensive compared to had I been in the kind of debt and the kind of practice loan debt. I honestly, they were into me for a little under $100,000. So I was probably looking at 160 grand in debt total. And I'm like, that's nothing compared to what someone in my same situation would be like now. And I was so dumb. I knew nothing at all. And I still did okay because the risks were not that high. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, Howard Ferran told me one time, he said, any average idiot can make 150 grand a year in dentistry. But those big mistakes, man, they can really sink you nowadays. Or even the little mistakes nowadays can really sink you because there's just so much debt. You wouldn't believe how many docs I speak to. They're like, I make more money than anybody I know, but I feel like I'm the poorest person that I know.
Well, and the kind of debt. I've told this story on the show a bunch too. What happens when you're in dental school, and I suspect this is probably what really happens. It's like, you go because you've got requirements to get, and you've got patients you're trying to see, and you're trying to get stuff done. You just go and sign the papers they put in front of you for your loans. You don't sit there and go, well, I'm going to be paying $5,000 a month on this loan for 20 years if I do this. I didn't ever, I never looked at how it was going to be amortized. I just signed on the dotted line so I could go back and get back to work. And I think that's not a lot different now than it was then, but the numbers are a lot bigger. Like, the consequences of not knowing what you're getting into seem much bigger to me now. And I hate to be negative about it because I have a great profession, but I'm also like, I had no risk compared to a lot of these people. I really didn't. I had no risk compared to these people. So I don't know what it's going to be like.
So what were some of those mistakes that you were talking about that you were making that you look back now and say, wow, I don't know why I did
certain
that.
kind of basic insurance that you're supposed to have as a business owner. These are the kinds of things where it was a few months before my accountant realized that like I didn't have like a business owner's policy whatsoever. I had, because I didn't know anything. Learning how to do payroll, learning that, I have to actually send money to the government after I take it out of their paychecks. Oh, I didn't realize that. I mean, literally the super dumb stuff that you would probably say you shouldn't even be doing this stuff. Just the bottom line is, it's like, I knew nothing about it. I was an associate. I got a paycheck and I went home after work, and there was, so just like, paying rent, having to negotiate stuff like that, buying supplies, like all the things that account for your overhead. These aren't, when you're an associate, you might have an idea about overhead because you may have to pay your lab bill, or you may have to, but honestly, it doesn't affect you that directly because you're probably going to get paid the same no matter what, and depending on, unless maybe you're lab. So it's just all these little things that as a business owner, it's so different. You have to monkey with, and then I bought a building 3 years ago, and then it's even a little bit deeper there, like the kinds of maintenance stuff that you didn't have to do as a renter. It's all kind of the same scale, if you know what I mean. Just new things that you didn't realize you're gonna have to do.
I thought a lot of people that business ownership is a lot about making small mistakes, but making sure that they're the small mistakes, and not making sure that you don't make any of the big mistakes,
Yeah,
like any like big malpractice things, or and a lot of in small business, there most things you can get past, but if you have some experience, someone there with you, be able to tell you about how to dodge a lot of those little cones in the street, then you're going to be able to be a lot better off in the long run.
I will say this. This is something that I. Okay, so when I was in dental school, I am. Hang on a second. When I was in dental school, I lived really cheaply because that's what my options were. That was like my parents were not willing to put me up in a. I was just talking to a buddy of mine at the University of Minnesota. They're shutting down my very favorite, like, divey Chinese restaurant. Uh, like,
Condolences.
I know, right? It's like I'm looking at. It's sort of a mourning period I'm going through, but because they're putting up more. If you go to the campus of the University of Minnesota, I mean, there are cranes everywhere. They're building and building, and there's these housing, like these beautiful like condos and apartments that students rent and stuff. It's amazing, and I'm thinking to myself, what a great place to live. Except you got to pay for that stuff. Well, I lived at the Psi Omega fraternity house for 3 years, and actually 2 of those years I was the treasurer, so I got $50 knocked off my $200 rent for a room at like a relatively divey. Sorry guys, but it's true. Relatively divey fraternity house. So I lived cheaply, and then like when I got home, I started working for Dad. I didn't buy a house right off the bat. I will say I bought a car, but I bought a used Infiniti Q45. It was I didn't buy a new car. I didn't buy a house. I lived in an apartment, and these are all things that. It's because I didn't really have any money. I didn't have any options. You start getting a paycheck and you're like, wow, I'm actually making something. Well, I didn't. I'd love to tell you it's because I was a brilliant strategist. It wasn't. It was just I didn't make any big moves. Maybe my parents would have smacked me up if I had done that. I don't know. But that's the thing. Like it's amazing how some of the decisions you make can cost you. So, for instance, I bought an inexpensive practice. I bought a fixer-upper. I didn't buy into a practice that had all the technology, a beautiful office, and I didn't buy into that. And so here's the thing. My practice was a dive for a long time, and I did good dentistry with what I had, and I upgraded slowly but surely. But the difference in the nut every month on a practice that I took out a loan for $100,000 versus a loan for $500,000 is a huge difference, right? But I was honestly not. It was never in the plan. I didn't look at it as maybe I could take a loan out for $500,000. I literally was clueless enough. So luckily, I bought cheap. I didn't even know it was a huge value. Same practice I'm in now. I mean, and I bought it for less than $100,000. Like it's an insane deal. And I tripped over. I didn't go looking for a value practice like that. I just happened to find it. But I'm going to tell you, if you want to be a practice owner and you're not going to do a startup, and I have to tell you, I don't have any experience with startups. It takes a certain kind of person, I think, to do a startup well. I'm sure you've talked about that on your show a lot, but buying a practice is a good thing. But I tell you what, man, you got to be careful what kind of practice you're going to buy, because if they've already got, I'd almost look for the ones that don't have the technology already, that don't have, because you can make, that's a point where you can negotiate, versus the primo practice that you walk in and you feel like you're large and in charge. That's an expensive way to go. I don't know. I'm not, as an accountant, I wonder what your opinion is on that.
So it's really comes down to the owner. It comes down to the doc. Like you said, it's a certain kind of person. It's also a certain type of mindset of, okay, if you're a person that's willing to move anywhere in the country, then to be a practice owner, then you may be better off doing a startup because there are such hotbeds in certain areas. However, it also depends on what your comfortable in doing if you're a doc that does like a lot of endo or a lot of ortho or whatever, and you find a place that is doing, you know, $1 million a year in revenue, and they don't offer one of the things that you offer, but you do everything else that they do, you can buy something effectively at a 30% discount because you know you
You're
can
going to
add that
create something
service.
there. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So you can get a lot of just equity immediately by introducing those services rather than referring things out. So it's kind of a mixed bag. And then also it depends on the practice that they're looking at acquiring. If the seller has a, you know, a reasonable basis of understanding of what their value is. We get so many sellers that come in, they just have no clue what they're doing.
Well,
They'll, you
the
know, they'll,
sellers too. A lot of the practices that become available are people like my dad sold his practice a few
yeah.
years ago. He did
Mhm.
really well. He did very
Mhm.
well, better than probably most people are doing around here. He and the buyer, again, he and the buyer are tight, close. They had a good relationship and everything. But the reality is, I think there's a lot of guys who feel like this is my retirement. I'm going to retire on this. I'm going to make a ton of money. And you know, late 2000s, you came to realize your practice is worth almost nothing. You know, at
Yeah,
that
it's
point, you can't
crazy.
you can't count on it the way that you thought you were going to count on it. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
And a lot of times we also get people to get the older generations, they get bad advice from their advisors because they'll be pretty wealthy typically. So they'll have really high-end advisors and they'll go to their advisors and be like, I'm selling this practice for 2 years net. And the advisors will be like, what are you talking about? Why are you selling it for 2 years net? It's worth at least 10 times that.
Yeah.
And you're just like, come on, like, no, it's not. Like, it's just not. That's not what the market is. We have one client, you know, that's trying to buy a practice right now, and we started off. It's a great practice. It's a specialty practice, and we came in at a price. The doctors had an agreement, and it was a certain price. And then the advisors got in, and the price went up, and it went up. The contingencies went up and up. The different issues with the agreement went up and up, and it's just like. And it was all because the advisors got in there and they didn't know what the heck they were talking about, and they're going to sink the deal. Like I'm 90% sure the deal is going to be sunk just because whenever the seller and the buyer had an agreement, they were okay with it. Like one of the tax guys, like this is kind of technical, but one of the tax guys was just like, yeah, we'll sell it for a stock sale because that way you won't have to pay as much in taxes.
Uh,
And it's just like that doesn't exist in dental practices. You don't do stock sales in dental practices, especially in the type of practice this was.
yeah.
And so it's just like he had this completely the wrong expectation. And this CPA, the person that's advising this seller, is like the partner of like a firm that's got like 60 employees. Like it's a big firm, and it's just like he just has no clue. But he's like the most expensive guy that there is in his community. So it's just like, obviously he has the best advice. It's just like, no, that's incorrect. You are wrong. So it just depends on who's the best. What would you do today? You think if you had to rewind, if everything just disappeared tonight, you were a new student coming out of dental school, knowing what you know now, what would you do as far as starting a practice?
Okay, I can tell you this. This is good. Now, mind you, I didn't get married until several years after I got out of dental school. I didn't meet my wife until several years after dental school.
Mhm.
So this gives me the freedom to say one of the reasons that this is not the hottest market. If you can imagine, the town I'm in was a huge GM town, and it's been a bit hollowed out in some ways. We lost a lot of people in Michigan and stuff. So
Couldn't even imagine. I can imagine.
it's a tough place. Actually, I love it, but now, it was tough in the beginning a little bit, but it'd be much tougher for someone to break in if they didn't. Like a lot of the dentists around here grew up here. They've got family ties here because it wouldn't make sense to necessarily choose Saginaw as the hottest market you could go to. There's a million dentists. There's a million great dentists. I'm not saying there's a lot of competition. I think we get, but the bottom line is it's not like a hotbed where you could come in and you'd be busy right off the bat. First off, if I were doing anything at all right now and my proclivities were such, I'd go back to school in pediatrics.
Mhm.
I'd be a pediatric dentist, and essentially anywhere outside of maybe big cities, you can open your doors and be so busy you won't even know what to do tomorrow. At least that's been my experience. Maybe there are places
Mhm.
where the pediatric market is really saturated. I've never seen that. I hate working on kids, so I actually wouldn't do that. But I mean, like if you could tolerate that and you're looking for advice, just take a look at that because it's a great living. And you can essentially go anywhere. So, the next thing would be, don't have any expectation of where you want to go, and then talk to someone like you who could say, this is the place you should be going because, if you could possibly be okay going rural and then just, get some of these demographic companies that can say, this is the hottest place you could market. If you opened up right here, you'd be busy with very little marketing and you could rock and roll. That'd be great. Except for the fact that as a brand new dentist, if you don't have a lot of clinical experience that you're comfortable with, then you're at a spot where you gotta, you want to have some clinical skills before you open up. Because if you're going to be super busy and you don't know what you're doing, that was really good. Being an associate for a year with my dad, I kind of got my feet under me, and that was a really good thing. But like, if I didn't have a tie to the area, I would be looking at these demographic areas because here's the thing, you can drive or fly to big cities and great places quite easily for not that much, especially in an area where you can just really kill it in a rural area. And I'm saying this not having been a guy who has done this. I just look at this. If I had it to do over, I would look really hard at that. If that's not an option, you look for the value practice. Look for the practice of, a practice like I got, something where there was it's horrible to say this, but a distress sale. If the dentist dies, that's a practice to buy immediately, because not to take advantage of the widow, but that practice is losing value the day that everyone realizes he's gone. Okay.
Yeah.
They're starting to look for something because they're like, oh, he's gone. So the sooner they can get someone into that practice, the better. Well, that's a negotiating point. That's not to say that I think you need to take advantage of the grieving widow necessarily, but or a practice where the guy really wants out bad and is that's where I was. Essentially my practice was the guy had died, except he didn't. He just left. So that's a spot to work into too. Associateships are great. Working into partnerships are great, but you're going to probably pay more. It's just that likely, because people who have a spot where they can handle an associate really well, where they could bring on a partner really well, it's likely they have a handle on the business side of it. And frankly, you're going to pay more to get in with someone who's really got it together. So you almost want to look for situations that are bordering on bad. I know it sounds horrible, but it's kind of true. That's what I would say to some extent. And honestly, you can always build from there. You can always build from there. Like my my little office that I was in, I used to pay $700 a month for my rent.
Wow.
And I think by the time I left, it was like $950 or something. Like, it was nothing. And but on the other hand,
childcare nowadays.
Exactly. It was terrible. It was a terrible little suite, but it was a terrible suite that a whole bunch of these great patients had been going to forever since they were children. So they were willing to put up with how horrible the place was. And then we moved to an office that's much nicer. It's not a Taj Mahal, but it's much nicer, much cooler. And I mean, if you imagine working in a horrible place for 16 years and then moving to a place that's, marginally better. I say that I love my office. My office is very cool, but some people would go, oh, it's just not fancy enough. Well, I love it. But part of that is that I worked in a place that was kind of horrible for 16 years. It's almost like if you can not buy into a lot of the heavy duty marketing about what a dental practice should be, you can save money on some of the bigger decisions you make. And then, either you get to take home more, or you just don't need to make as much. There's a couple different ways to look at it. So, I mean, if I were doing it again, I would definitely start with specializing someplace where they need you, and then maybe looking for areas where there's no dentist. I mean, that's if you can be flexible where you have to be. As soon as you decide you have to live in Seattle or Ann Arbor or someplace where there's a dearth of just a ton of dentists everywhere, you're in trouble. You're looking for, it's harder work and it's more expensive. So that's my thoughts.
So what are some of the lessons you've learned over your time? Now, I may be putting my foot in my mouth here, but I believe I've seen you talk about using a microscope before.
Yes.
Is that something that has clinical benefits, or does it also have business benefits? What are those purposes for?
It's interesting you say this. I think most people would say the really heavy duty microscope users are going to tell you, oh, it's the greatest thing. But I don't know that you can look at a financial ROI on it really well, except though, if you use it, here's one way that I use it that I have found. We had our biggest year last year, and my biggest year is much smaller than most people's biggest year, but nonetheless, we had our biggest year last year, and I can account for it at least partially by the way I use these microscopes. And I have them in my hygiene rooms. I have them in my operatories as well, but I literally, I have 4 of them now. I had 2 before, and when I had 2, I had them in my hygiene rooms for that year. And I have an HD camera mounted on them, so basically the patients can see exactly what I see while I'm doing their exam. So it's like an intraoral camera, except it's on steroids, and it's live. Yeah. Okay, it's live. Like When I'm tapping on your tooth with the Explorer, you see me tapping on the tooth with the Explorer. So there's a tactile version. In other words, they know you're not making anything up. This is the real deal. And so when I say this tooth has a cavity, I can show it to you right there. We need to restore this. Or this tooth is, 90% filling. We need to do something with it. It is easy for them to say. And so I think a lot of times treatment decisions were made more wisely by patients. And there was a lot of co-diagnosis. They bought into it. So I think for selling treatment, you don't even have to sell it really at that point. Patients are seeing stuff and going, yeah, we should treat that. So that's kind of cool. But I think I got more treatment acceptance when people could see their teeth in the microscope. The other thing that I've got is I have a video recorder right there and then. So I'm recording all the exams. So I have archival footage of every exam I've done in whatever room, for a long time. So it's easy for me to go back and steal a HD image if I need to for insurance or if I forget, what was I looking at here? I can actually look at that. So that's pretty cool. I think if you wanted to talk about a financial thing, financially, that would probably be the most helpful thing. Clinically, it's changed my life. I'm just a better dentist when I use a microscope. I can see more and I can treat things at a higher level of detail. I don't think it's for everyone. I use high powered loops and a headlight for a lot of stuff too. So, I've always been kind of a magnification junkie since, honestly, I had my first set of headlamp or loops and a headlamp in 1998. So I've been using them ever since I've been practicing, essentially. I love the scopes. I think they're a blast. In a way, they've been a shot in the arm for me because they're kind of fun. It's like going in and playing around with some toys, But it surprises me how much better and how much more I can see when I'm using this thing. And the eye strain is nothing. I mean, like the image is amazing. And you can make yourself sit up real straight with it too. Your posture and ergonomics are much better when using the microscope. So there's a lot to it. I don't know that I could say, your overhead's gonna be way low. No, not really. One of the great things that if you want to buy equipment that's gonna make you money, don't have a pan for the first 10 years of your career and then buy a pan and all of a sudden you can charge for something that you couldn't charge for before. I mean, that's where if you want to buy equipment that makes you money, it's when you can offer a service that you didn't. Microscopes are not really like that because it's not really procedure driven. Although, honestly, I think most endodontists use a microscope. It borders on standard of care in endodontics. But so the bottom line is, it's like it isn't one of those that's going to like have that killer financial ROI right off the bat. But I love them. I swear by them. So.
I believe that is an important piece, is being able to show someone what you're doing. So like you said, you use the word co-diagnosis. That way the patient actually sees, oh yeah, that looks really bad. Or that looks gross, or that needs to be fixed. And you're showing them rather than telling them. Because if you show them, all they have to trust is their eyes.
Yep.
If you're telling them, they have to trust you, which
Well,
obviously you'd love to be able to do. I think like Dr. Costas could probably get anyone to trust him because he's such a likable guy, and he works a lot on presentation, and I've listened to some of his stuff about how he has people come through and it leads them to be able to make a decision so that they'll trust the doctor and his practices. But if you can show them, and that's the whole reason a lot of people use the intraoral cameras, is so they can actually show people things as well, so that they can actually treat, they can accept it themselves rather than just having to say, I don't feel, I'm not bedridden with the pain that's in my mouth right now.
It hasn't brought me to my knees quite yet. Exactly.
Yes. And we may be going there, but I don't feel right now, so there's no reason for me to do this. I think that could actually be a very big business thing. As far as, have you ever talked to Dr. Tom Larkin by chance?
I haven't.
So
the name is familiar, but I have not.
He was a dentist that owned a practice for multiple years, and now he teaches business management at a few colleges. But he works a lot on the oral and systemic health connection. And that was a lot of what he talked about, is showing people actually, what it is that's going on with their mouth and how that relates to their total overall health. So I think that's both very interesting ways of doing that. So yeah, I think you actually have a business thing there that is one of those rare birds of being a synergistic, of being very good for being able to get people to accept things, but also being good from a clinical aspect.
I have thought about kind of putting together a presentation about that, because there's a few microscope users that are doing it like that, but I've it's really funny. Sometimes I'll go back and build a treatment plan off the video that I took, and I'll think to myself, this is amazing. This is this is like having the patient right here. You kind of forget how much information. Like photos are awesome, but when you've got video, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's very cool. I mean, there's a lot of technologies that are pointing at that. So you're essentially going to have like this. You're going to have the patient in your office even when the patient's not in your office, and that's a big deal for treatment planning. Because I think there's a lot of pressure on dentists to come up with the treatment plan sitting chairside next to the patient. I'm like, you know what? I think sometimes you need to have a little chance to study the case when you don't have someone breathing over your shoulder to find out how much stuff's going to cost. You know, I really try hard not to, unless it's a simple case. I don't want to try and all the incentives are to get that case put together in 2 seconds. I'm like, you're doing your patient a disservice when you don't have a chance to kind of step back. I think personally, I'd love to say that I always do that correctly. I probably don't.
So tell me a little bit about how Dental Hacks came together.
Okay, so starting in 2006, I started listening to podcasts. We have a farm. I live on a farm with my wife. We have horses, and I'm 40 minutes away from my office. It's a 40-minute drive every morning and a 40-minute drive back. So I have time on my hands that I can't be, that I'm doing stuff, feeding horses or driving back and forth to work, that sort of thing. So audiobooks have been my thing. I've been an Audible listener since I might have been using Audible in 1998. I think I'm like one of their first 20 people or something like that. It was crazy. I went through a series of really junky MP3 players before I ever got a smartphone. So I had
a Zune.
Exactly. I had a Rio 500. Check that one out. It's
nice.
Anyhow, so I listened to audiobooks for a long time, and then in 2006, someone started talking about podcasts. I don't know. And so the first 2 podcasts I ever listened to, one's called The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, which is still going on. And that's a roundtable. It's always been a roundtable. It's been 5 people kind of, bantering back and forth about stuff. It's good show. I mean, they've got hundreds of episodes. They get, 60, 70,000 downloads an episode easily. Maybe more now at this point. It's just insane. And then there's one called Muggle Cast, which was actually put on by a bunch of, at the time, they were high school students. And they were just Harry Potter fans. And their podcast was, and there was also kind of a round table. So they were very good. And I listened to a ton of this stuff. And even back then, I'm like, man, this is cool. I wonder if I could do this for the longest time. And there really was nothing in dentistry going on. The very first dental podcast I heard was the AGD guy by the name of Dr. Wes Blakesley, who's still around. I don't know that he does the podcast anymore, but he did a decent interview podcast back in the day too. But it seems like he stopped doing it. And then I started listening to, Gary Takis was on the scene early, as well as David Maloli, the Relentless Dentist. He was on early. And Bilal Saib, he was on pretty early. And I was on a podcast called The Prism Podcast, who's Dr. Grant Ritchie and Dr. Jason Luchtefeld were doing one. And theirs was more about sort of scientific skepticism, less about dentistry. So I was on their podcast as a guest and realized that I loved it. Like this is great. I could totally do this. Then I was on Bilal's like a week later, and I'm like, oh, this is great. I could do this all day long. This was awesome. And then, so I think in, May of 2014 or maybe even April, we probably started putting it together. But then Jason had been, he was the social media dentist for a long time. And like probably 2011, 2012, he wrote a book. So I got in contact with him on Facebook because I basically stole a bunch of ideas from him for a lecture that I was doing. I had questions, he had all the answers, so we got to know each other, and then by chance we took a course from Jason Smithson at Cosmodent in 2013. It was September 2013, and we kicked around the idea of a podcast. I'm like, dude, I've always thought of doing a podcast. We should do a podcast together. So it took us a while to kind of pull it together. And then he came up with the first guest, who's Dr. Lance Timmerman, who's been on the show a bunch of times, and he actually has his own show and everything like that. And we just started. It was classic. We didn't know what we were doing at all, and we just did it. And I stole format ideas from other shows because I didn't want to do just straight interview. I really like the roundtable format, so we stole that, and we do that. The second half of our show is called The Brain Trust, and it's got multiple dentists kicking around a topic typically. And I have to say, I think most people listen to us for the Brain Trust more than the interviews, because the Brain Trust is like sitting around with your dental school friends, talk and stuff. So it's been really good. I mean, it's been fun to do the roundtable thing. And that's kind of where I got a lot into the technology for the roundtable. In any case, so we started in, I think our first episodes were June of 2014. And We just went over, well, our last episode was 108, but we have quite a few sort of, special episodes where we'll throw stuff in. So we've probably got 120 episodes out there, something like that. And the format has kind of stuck. We continue to do it this way, although we kind of shake it up. But it's just been such a huge, it's a blast. I get to talk to people that I'd never really get to talk to otherwise. We get to sit around and tell jokes and laugh, and it's just sort of become its own animal. It's been honestly, it's probably the most satisfying thing outside of my family that I've ever done. I got to remember to do some dentistry. That's what it comes,
every once in a while,
every
right?
once in a while I got to show up and work, because so this has been, it's kind of my passion. I spend a lot of time doing it. So, but I like it. It has not stopped being fun for me. So I'm enjoying it.
You've left the luxurious life of dentistry to enter the very lucrative life of
That's right.
podcasting.
Fat podcasting cash. Exactly.
Yeah.
But what's funny about it though is it brings you a lot of stuff though too. Like you'll find this, I'm sure too, when you have a platform, which is in a way what a podcast or a blog or a website that actually puts out consistent content. When you have a platform, sometimes people want to be able to use that platform. So I'm sure you've had lots of people that would like to be on your show. We get that sometimes too. I try and be kind of choosy with guests. I try and work with guests that kind of get it,
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes people they figure someone's got a platform, we want to use it, and I want them to be. My theory on podcasting is it's got to be, if at all possible, at least as equally as entertaining as it is informative. So in other words, I can't be a dry lecture type. Not going to do that because I won't listen to that myself.
Mm-hmm.
So we try and keep it light, keep it entertaining as much as possible. And if I don't think a guest can keep up with that, I try to avoid them. I don't know. I try to. It's not always the case, but I try to. So there's some stories that are so important to tell. I worry a little less about the humor aspects, but I will say that, I mean, we've tried to keep it pretty light and interesting. It's been fun. Like how do you find yourself running into guests? My guest thing is, I'm terrible. I typically go, that sounds like a cool guy. I'll email him. It's a lot of times it's as simple as seeing someone on Facebook that says something interesting. We get a lot of suggestions from listeners, which has been very helpful too. But just people that we aspire to talk to, we kind of chase them down. How do you get guests?
So, it just depends. Very, very rarely. I think we're on, this will probably be the 45th episode or something like that, 46th episode. And I think maybe two have reached out to me. And the reason is because I really like to have people on that have either been referred to me by a client or I know is being used by a client.
Sure. Because
I have this big fear of this industry because there's so many sharks out there.
Yeah.
Of someone coming in and me introducing someone into my people that is not there for the best of reasons. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, and I'm probably, honestly, that's the reason I have 2-week lulls. I try to do every week, but sometimes I'll have 2-week lulls because I get busy running a business,
mm-hmm.
and I don't have time to do the podcast because I am so selective on who I try to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the message is very important. What they do is important. And honestly, as time has gone on, in the beginning it was easy because it was like I can have people that were very reputable that I know have a good message and can speak. And as time has gone on, it's been more, because I am like a niche within a niche, right? I'm not just dentistry. I am
Mm-hmm.
people who want to be business in dentistry,
Mm-hmm.
who want to start a business and things like that, and who want to maybe acquire a practice. So I have to find very specific people. Sometimes I have to stretch it a little bit to be able to make it come back into to the right line.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few episodes that I've recorded that I've just not put out there because it was just like the guy was just like, yeah, I make people millions of dollars and yada yada yada. It's just, okay, this isn't
So
this
it's like
work.
uncomfortable. I get it totally.
Yeah. So that that's how we typically get them. If I love the format that you have. If I could figure out 1 iota of the audio technical things that you know how to do at this point, I may do it not the same way, but I just can't believe you guys have the ability to get everyone on the same schedule. I feel like trying to get docs to have be on a schedule is like herding cats a lot of the time.
It totally is. And it's only recently now that I have a big enough group of people to draw from that when I throw a scheduled thing up for the Brain Trust, I typically will have enough people signed up over a period of 4 or 5. We do it through Facebook. It's honestly not nearly as I know you and a lot of the guys will have a scheduling program. I'm so not even close to organized like that. But the brain trust has actually gotten simpler for me now than the interviews, because we have a really good time when you're recording it. It's like
Yeah.
basically we do an hour, and it usually takes us no longer than an hour and 15 minutes to record it. We do some sound checking and all that stuff when we're off to the races. And it's typically a fun conversation. And lately, all the conversations have come up within this Facebook group saying, we got to talk, this sucks, we should talk about this. And then we do it. And so now it's really, it's almost got a life of its own. And that's what I always hope for anyhow. I mean, like Jason and I do just fine alone, but it's always more fun to bring in like different, like I love bringing in new people that haven't been on the show before and stuff. And a lot of times it's listeners that just like the format. So I'm in love with the format. It is a little bit more difficult to try and get everyone on the page, but when you have enough people to kind of grab from, you can almost always make it work. Just lately, I've run into that. It's been tougher before. You have people that schedule and then have to reschedule or cancel and stuff. So it's nice to have a few people that can back up. It's been great, and I think it's only because they enjoy doing it. I lucked out; they enjoy doing it as much as I do, so it's not as hard to schedule them. So
Very cool. So tell me a little bit about, as far as if you were to be starting a practice today, like all the information that's out there in podcasts, is it overwhelming at this point, you think, or is it what would you do if you had to listen to podcasts and you were a dentist right now?
there's so much information out there, and I think it's hard because I will say that in dentistry, a lot of the podcasts are business oriented, and I think that's probably not a bad thing. I think it's probably all right that they are. Because I think dentists kind of suffer from like what I didn't come into it with any kind of a business aspiration at all. So it would have been helpful for me. The nice thing is that there's a variety. There's probably less clinical stuff out there than there is business stuff for dentists at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's fine, because clinical stuff is a little harder to do unless you're doing a video podcast. I mean, it's pretty difficult sometimes to talk about stuff. The best thing is the best part about that is visual. Business stuff is actually very applicable to audio. So I think some of the business things have a little advantage over us on that way. Because Jason and I tend to do, well, we do a little of everything actually, but I guess I'm going to just plug it right here, because the podcasters in the dental field all get along really well. Like we have our own little private groups and stuff, and we're pretty open and stuff. So we a few
the
of us,
Illuminati.
It is. It's right. Like we have. It's nice to have a private group of our own, right? So, but we've kind of come up with an idea that we're hoping is going to be spectacularly cool to do a meeting with everyone, like have all these dental podcasters come together. Because I got to tell you, we all share audiences. It's not like the Dental Hacks has one audience and you have another audience, and and Gary Takis has another audience. They're all, I think a lot of people, there are podcast listening dentists, and then most of them listen to some extent to all of these different shows depending on what the topics are. And that's what's kind of cool, because you know what, if we're talking about composites and you're an endodontist, you know what, you're probably not going to want to listen to our episode then. And if you're talking about purchasing a practice as a new dentist, it's interesting, but it's not super applicable to me. I might go to something else. But now, there's like 30 some dental podcasts out there, so there's tons of information out there. You can kind of pick and choose. And like you said, not that many people in the world that have enough time to listen to everything every week. It's like,
right,
you got to be able to commit a lot of time. However, we're doing the Voices of Dentistry meeting, which is basically a bunch of us all getting together in one place, and that place happens to be Nashville, Tennessee, January 27th to 28th. And we're going to do a meeting featuring dental podcasters. I think we're leaving it kind of wide open to what the podcasters are going to do. My dream would be to do a take on whatever your show is live. And the reason I say that is because the people are going to be coming to this thing not because they need another dental meeting with CE. It has CE. They're coming to this meeting because they're podcast listeners, and these are the people that they have in their ear and their head. They want to meet them and see them and stuff. So my hope is that the podcasters will do something that relates to their show. That do it, like Jason and I for sure are going to do Brain Trust, and we'll probably do some of the segments that we do. I'm sure that there's no doubt that we're going to try and do something for Dental Hacks listeners specifically, and then we want to meet our people. We want to get out there. So there's going to be tons of chance for interaction, with the podcasters. For instance, if you have fans that have always said, I'd like to meet Jonathan in person. I'd like to ask him some questions. I'd like to buy him a beer. There's going to be that option. I mean, that's totally going to be there as well. There's going to be lots of time built in for socializing. There's also going to be my goal is to set up different studio rooms, so when the socializing type time, when people aren't doing lectures and presentations and stuff, people can record. Like, so for the podcasters, it's a little bonus because you'll be able to, record a bunch of content while you're there. And what I'm thinking is people that are podcast listeners are always probably potential podcast creators, and so it's like, hey, you can try your hand at the mic, see what you think. How is an interview? How does a roundtable fit? How does an interview fit for you? And then basically, I'd love to do recording for the hacks and for with people. So my thought process is, let's get all these dental podcasters together. Let them bounce off each other. Like, I'm loving the concept of, maybe some of the business people sitting down to do a roundtable. Maybe you and Dr. Russell Kirk and all the people who kind of do, and Mark Costas, all these people that do specific business stuff. Let's have you guys do a roundtable. And we're going to leave it kind of fluid like that, because I think, the people who listen are going to be able to tell us what they want to see. So that's my hope. My hope is that it's like almost everyone doing their own live gig. So if you're interested in information too, there's a website, voicesofdentistry.com.
So if you've ever wanted to meet your heroes in your earbuds, then the Voices of Dentistry, January 27th and 28th is going to be the place to be. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot more, it's not going to be a stuffy,
oh my gosh,
convention about, hey, here's how you do this and here's how you do that. It's going to be people bringing their best stuff, because we all enjoy, this isn't like, we were joking about it earlier, this isn't, a money thing. And this is a thing that we like doing because we like to introduce people to things. Like, I started this podcast because I was talking to consultants, every day, trying to network for my business. And I was like, why am I not just recording this? I'm getting some really valuable information in. Yeah. So I just basically tweaked how I talk to people. And it's okay, well, we're going to record it now. And I'll put it out on iTunes and everybody else can listen to it now. And you wouldn't believe the amount of people that email me and are just like, thank you so much for doing this. I'm starting a practice here in 2 years. I've listened to every episode that you've put out. It's been so insightful for me to be able to learn all these different things. And that's what we love to do. So if you want to see like the culmination of all those interviews, then the Voices of Dentistry is where it's going to be.
I agree. It's crazy to think that it's so funny, because I was at Chicago and a couple people approached. We were at the Opera DDS booth kind of for a meet and greet. And people were sort of, they acted like I was some kind of a big deal. I'm like, listen, I'm a dude in my basement talking into the microphone. I am super grateful that you would come and even acknowledge that I'm bothering to do this. It's really fun to meet people and kind of get, to see who it is that's listening, because there's some people on the other end of this thing. It's nice to know. And like I said, the kind of people that listen to podcasts, I have found, are the kind of people that I want to be around. So that's sort of why we do a meeting like this. I mean, it's not that I dislike people who don't listen to podcasts, but it's a certain breed of cat that's listening to podcasts. And so why not bring all those people together? Podcasters and listeners, man. It's gonna be the greatest meeting ever. I can hardly wait.
I prefer to turn my nose to anyone who recognizes me.
That's right. If your taste is so bad that you would listen to me over and over again, I got to wonder about it. That's right.
Yeah, I don't know about that guy. Yeah, he must be kind of strange.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's the same way. You have people that come talk to you, and it's like, I'm just a CPA that really likes the world of dentistry. So, thank you for your time today. We're running up on the end of the hour. Is there anything else that you want to share? Guys, go and listen to the Dental Hacks. It's a fantastic quality podcast. You may actually notice that this episode is probably a higher degree of quality than the typical episode, just from the both in content as well as audio quality, and that's the reason, because Dr. Meade decided, or we had some technical difficulties.
I couldn't get Google Hangouts to work. I don't know. You'd think if I'm so technical I could figure it out, but I couldn't get it to work with my mic. So
you had to fight the conglomerate that is Google to be able to make that.
That's right. I blame this on them. That's right.
Yeah, so we'll blame them. But Dr. Meade actually is hosting this one, so that's the reason the quality may be better. So guys, I really encourage you to look at go into their podcast. Reach out to Dr. Meade in whichever ways you can. And thank him for coming on. Thank him for what he does to the dental industry. And definitely go and check out voicesofdentistry.com. If you go in before October 1st and use the keyword or coupon code START, you actually get $200 off before off of the total price.
$200 off the already ridiculously low price. Really funny.
Yeah.
Sean and I were looking at, there was a couple other meetings that were sort of similarly sized meetings and stuff. And he's like, oh my God, we're charging way too low. It's like, it's too late. It's out there already. So yeah, $200 off the already low price. Just go for it. It's inexpensive. It's going to be the greatest meeting ever. You're going to want to go again and again. Again, I can hardly wait.
Yeah, so January 27th, 28th, just so you guys know what I typically see for other conferences that are 2 days long, you're usually looking at like $3,000 or $4,000, for 2 days worth of high quality speakers, high quality people. Because again, you're going to be talking to people that have spent, 40 to 50 hours interviewing other people and talking about whatever their subject is, not to mention the hundreds of hours outside of the podcast doing whatever it is that they do. So you're going to be able to get all of that condensed down into bite-sized segments, and you'll be able to experience all of it. So, and what is the sticker price for the 2-day event?
Well, I'm going to go to the site right now. It's funny. It's like when people ask me how much stuff costs, I have to
or like what your phone number is.
Exactly. I know that with the $200 discount, I don't want to misquote. Sean would kick my butt if I did that. Okay, Voices of Dentistry. So it's voicesdentistry.com. You can see, and as we add people to, you can kind of see who all's there. It's kind of a who's who in dental podcasting. Right now, it's $7.99 for doctors, $4.99 for students, $2.99 for staff and family, and staff and family are going to enjoy it as much as anything. But so it's $7.99, but it's with the coupon code, we're talking $5.99. That's for 2 days. That's 14 hours of CE. That's insane.
$300 a day.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus,
exactly. And we're feeding you for crying out loud.
And it's Nashville. That's if you like country music, that's great. Even if you don't like country music, it's still a great town.
Nashville's an awesome town. Oh my gosh. We went earlier this year for a meeting, and it was a total blast. I never would have believed it either. Nashville's got everything, so it's very cool.
It's a hub. It's a big hub
of
it is.
It
middle
totally
America.
Is. Had no idea it was such a big deal. It was awesome. So yeah, Nashville was a natural choice.
Well, again, Dr. Meade, thanks again for coming on. We appreciate you being a friend of the podcast.
Absolutely. Glad to do it.
We'll look forward to seeing you in January.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon.
A special thanks to Dr. Meade for sticking around longer and providing some really incredible insight into his background in creating a successful dental practice and podcast. So as you know, there's such a flood of information these days in dentistry, which is why I'm really excited for you to dive into Dr. Meade's Top 5 Dental Hacks episodes. So to get access to that, simply text practice to 33444. Again, that's practice to 33444, or visit startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus if you're outside of the U.S. You'll also receive updates on the latest episodes of Start Your Dental Practice, helpful tips for owning and running a dental practice, as well as promotional opportunities direct to your inbox. And don't forget, register for the Voices of Dentistry before October 1st with the promo code START in order to get a big discount on that registration fee. It's going to be a great time. Come on out, guys. So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Start Your Dental Practice community. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and go to startyourdentalpractice.com/iTunes to leave your honest feedback and review on iTunes. It's going to help me create a better experience, a better show, a better podcast for you, the ambitious dentist. Your feedback really does help, regardless if you like the show today or not. If you didn't like the show, let me know, because it's going to help me create a better show and podcast for you. Lastly, if you know of anybody that would benefit from today's episode and today's content, today's guest, please feel free to share with them on social media or through email.